Brooksville, a small town in central Florida with just over 8,000 inhabitants. Simple houses, quiet streets, where almost nothing extraordinary usually happens. But in the summer of 2023, something quietly began to change in the life of a lady named Dorothy Mae Henderson, age 74. In her backyard, there was only a small flower bed and a simple statue of the Virgin Mary, purchased more than 3 decades earlier, when she suddenly lost her husband. For Dorothy, that object had always been just a symbol of faith and remembrance. But that summer, in the face of a family tragedy and the arrival of her orphaned great-granddaughter, that statue would become the center of a story that would change not only the lives of Dorothy and little Emma, but also of an entire community. Ordinary people from Brooksville still swear to this day that they witnessed something inexplicable. Some say it was a miracle. Others believe it was nothing more than coincidence. What is certain is that within just a few weeks, this lady's backyard became a place of pilgrimage, hope, and also controversy. Today we are going to walk together through this complete story, from the very beginning when Emma arrived traumatized at her great-grandmother's house, to the events that divided the city between faith and doubt. Before continuing, I want to ask you a sincere question. Are you ready to accept Mary's call for your life? If your answer is yes, comment, "I'm ready," and don't forget to subscribe to the channel, because here, miracles happen every day. Dorothy's life remained quiet until the early hours of June 12, 2023. It was on that day that the news struck like lightning. Her daughter Jennifer and husband Michael had died in a car accident on Interstate 75 near Gainesville. And suddenly, a child of only 2 years and 4 months was left orphaned. That child was Emma Rose Thompson, Dorothy's granddaughter. With no other living relatives, social services knocked on Mrs. Henderson's door. Despite her advanced age, she was the only one the little girl could turn to. Imagine the shock of this 74-year-old woman, overnight, having to deal with the grief of losing her daughter, the pain of a traumatized great-granddaughter, and the responsibility of restarting an entire routine. Emma arrived at her grandmother's house in the following days, silent, withdrawn, practically without speaking. The pediatrician who examined her, Dr. Patricia Williams, described, "Emma showed classic signs of severe psychological trauma. She didn't speak, didn't smile, didn't make eye contact. She was trapped inside her own pain." Dorothy tried to cheer her granddaughter with toys, old songs, stories. But nothing seemed to break through that wall of silence. At night, Dorothy would put her to bed and then cry alone in her room, remembering the husband who had already passed away and the granddaughter she had just lost. The weight seemed unbearable. Everything changed on the morning of June 18, 2023, exactly 3 days after Emma's arrival. Dorothy was in the kitchen preparing oatmeal for breakfast when she heard a clear and articulate voice coming from the backyard. "Hello, beautiful lady. Do you live here in this garden?" Dorothy dropped the pan and ran to the window. She saw Emma, who until then barely mumbled a few words, sitting cross-legged in front of the statue of the Virgin Mary, talking as if she were speaking to a real person. "My God in heaven," Dorothy murmured, wiping her hands on her apron before rushing out to the backyard. "Emma, darling, who are you talking to?" The girl turned around with a radiant smile, the first expression of joy Dorothy had seen on her little face since the accident. "With the pretty lady in the blue dress, Nana Dot. She said her name is Mary and that she's going to take care of me now." Dorothy felt a shiver run through her entire body. Emma was not only speaking with perfect clarity, forming complex sentences, but also calling her Nana Dot, the affectionate nickname Harold used for Dorothy, which Emma had never heard before. "And what else did Mary say to you, my flower?" Emma turned back to the statue, stayed silent for a few seconds, as if listening to something, and then replied, "She said Mommy and Daddy are fine, that they're in a beautiful garden with Great-Grandpa Harold. And Mary also said you don't have to cry in your room anymore because Great-Grandpa Harold is happy and sends you a kiss. Dorothy's legs gave way, and she had to lean on the garden bench Harold had built in 1987. The night before, she had cried alone in her room for over an hour, holding the wedding photo of her and Harold. She had done this every night since Emma arrived, but never when the girl could see or hear. "How do you know that, Emma?" "Mary told me, Nana Dot." From that day on, Emma's routine completely changed. Every morning, right after breakfast, she would go to the backyard and spend at least 2 hours talking to the statue. Dorothy watched from the kitchen window, fascinated and frightened at the same time. Emma spoke excitedly, told her dreams, asked questions, and then fell into complete silence, clearly listening to answers. Sometimes she laughed out loud, other times she became thoughtful, and occasionally she even disagreed, shaking her little head and arguing as she would with any adult. "Mary, why don't the flowers here ever get ugly like the ones in the neighbor's garden?" Emma asked on an afternoon in June. Dorothy saw her granddaughter tilt her little head to the right, her characteristic way of listening to Mary, and remain like that for almost a minute. "Oh, I get it. Because when we truly love something, it becomes stronger. And Nana Dot really loves these flowers because they remind her of Great-Grandpa Harold. And you love them too, right, Mary? That's why they never die." Dorothy wiped her eyes. Harold had indeed helped plant those flowers in the first year after they bought the statue. It was the project they were working on together when he died. But the first truly inexplicable event happened on Monday, June 26, 2023. Emma ran into the house around 10 in the morning, her eyes shining with excitement. "Nana Dot, Nana Dot, Mary told me something super important." "What is it, my princess?" "The lady in the yellow house, the one across the street. She's very, very sick inside, but the doctors don't know what it is. Maria said that if she makes a warm tea with the little green leaves that grow in her backyard, near the back fence, she will get better." Dorothy was confused. The yellow house was the residence of Carmen Rodriguez, a 52-year-old Mexican immigrant who had been living there for only 6 months. Dorothy had barely spoken with the woman beyond polite greetings. "Emma, dear, how can Maria know that Mrs. Rodriguez is sick? And how do you know she has medicinal plants in her yard?" "Maria sees everything, Nana Dot. She takes care of everyone on our street, not just us. And she said it has to be today, before the sun goes down, or else the illness will get stronger." Dorothy hesitated. Going to the house of a neighbor she barely knew to talk about herbal teas based on what her 2-year-old granddaughter had heard from a statue seemed completely absurd. But there was something in Emma's urgency and certainty that convinced her. At 4 p.m., Dorothy crossed the street and rang the doorbell of the yellow house number 1252. Carmen Rodriguez answered the door looking exhausted. She was a small woman with gray hair who worked as a cleaner at the hospital. "Hola, Mrs. Henderson. Todo bien?" "Hi, Carmen. Sorry to bother you. May I ask you a personal question? Have you been feeling well lately?" Carmen's face changed immediately. She looked around as if to make sure no one was listening and motioned Dorothy inside. "Ay, Mrs. Henderson, estoy muy preocupada. For 3 weeks I've been feeling terrible. Very tired, stomach pain, I can't eat. I already went to the hospital where I work twice. They did blood tests, x-rays, but they can't find anything." Dorothy took a deep breath. "Carmen, I know this will sound strange, but do you have medicinal plants in your backyard, specifically near the back fence?" Carmen's eyes widened. "Como sabe? Yes, I have spearmint, chamomile, lemon balm. My abuela taught me to plant them." "But why do you ask?" "My granddaughter, she has a very strong intuition about these things. She thinks a tea from that plant could help with what you are feeling." Carmen was silent for a moment, studying Dorothy's sincere face. "My abuela always said that little children sometimes know things that we cannot see. I'll try the tea." On Thursday, June 29th, Carmen knocked on Dorothy's door at 7 a.m., before even going to work. Her face was flushed, and her eyes were glowing with energy. "Mrs. Henderson, es un milagro. 3 days drinking lemon balm tea, and I feel completely new. The pain is gone. I'm eating again. I have energy." The news spread quickly through the street. In a small town like Brooksville, where everyone knows everyone, the story of the little girl who healed Carmen Rodriguez with tea reached half the town in just a few days. On Saturday, July 1st, a small group of curious people stood on the sidewalk in front of Dorothy's house, waiting to see Emma talk to the statue. And Emma did not disappoint. "Nana Dot," she said after her morning conversation with Mary, "the man in the green house with the white fence is going to get a call today. That will make him cry. But it's happy crying. Maria said his wife, who went to live in heaven, sent him a very special surprise." Dorothy looked in the indicated direction. The greenhouse with the white fence was the home of Robert "Bobby" Martinez, a 45-year-old Iraq War veteran who had lost his wife Sophia to breast cancer 2 years earlier. Bobby had lived alone since then and rarely left the house. That afternoon, around 3:30, Bobby Martinez came running out of his house toward Dorothy's, crying uncontrollably and shouting, "Mrs. Henderson, Mrs. Henderson, my daughter Anna just called. She's pregnant. I'm going to be a grandfather. After 5 years of trying, she finally got pregnant." Bobby was sobbing with joy on Dorothy's porch. "I swear on Sophia's soul, when I got the call, I felt her there in the room with me. I smelled her perfume, that rose one she always wore. It was like she was hugging me and whispering in my ear that she always knew this grandchild would come." Dorothy shivered. Sophia Martinez really did wear a rose perfume. She remembered because Sophia always left a sweet trail when she walked down the street. From that moment on, life in that town was never the same. Every day Emma made at least 2 or 3 specific predictions during her conversations with Maria, and all of them came true with impressive accuracy. On July 3rd, Emma said that an important letter would arrive for Mrs. Linda Watson. The next day, Linda received approval for the retirement she had been waiting for 8 months. On July 5th, Emma warned that the Johnson family's cat was sick and needed to go to the vet before tomorrow morning. Sarah Johnson took Whiskers to Spring Hill Animal Hospital that same afternoon and discovered an intestinal obstruction that, according to Dr. Kevin Murphy, could have been fatal if untreated within 24 hours. On July 8th, Emma said that Mr. Frank O'Connor would find something he had lost under the white thing where he keeps the car. Frank found his wedding ring, lost 3 years ago, under a paint can in the corner of the garage. In 2 weeks, Emma's fame had spread throughout Brooksville. People began coming from other streets, other neighborhoods, even from nearby towns like Spring Hill, Weeki Wachee, and Dade City, to meet the little girl who talks with Our Lady. Dorothy tried to maintain some normality, but soon realized it was beyond her control. Dorothy woke up on July 15th to the sound of cars on the street. It was 6 a.m., and there were already people parking in front of the house. "Jesus Christ," she muttered, putting on her robe. Through the window she counted 12 cars and about 20 people on the sidewalk. Some had brought lawn chairs. Emma came down the stairs, dragging her doll. "Nana Dot, there are people outside." "I know, dear." "They'll leave soon." But they didn't. When Emma went out to the backyard after breakfast, people gathered at the fence as if it were a show. Emma sat in front of the statue as always. "Hi, Maria. Why are there so many people watching?" Dorothy saw Emma tilt her head to listen. Then the girl looked at the people at the fence. "The lady with the glasses, your husband is going to call this afternoon. He's fine." A woman in the crowd began to cry. "My husband disappeared 3 days ago," she shouted. "He left for work and never came back." Maria said he's at his brother's house. They argued, but he will call. Dorothy watched the scene, feeling sick. This was turning into a circus. Around 4 p.m., the woman with the glasses came running back to Dorothy's house. "He called. My husband called. He was at his brother-in-law's in Gainesville." The news spread. The next day there were 50 people. Dorothy tried to set limits. Emma only talks in the morning from 8 to 10, she announced, and no more than 3 people at a time. But people didn't respect it. They knocked on the door at all hours, called in the middle of the night. Some even jumped the fence to get closer to the statue. Dorothy had to call the police twice. "Mrs. Henderson," said Sergeant O'Sullivan, "legally we can't do much. They're not trespassing if they stay on the sidewalk. And what if I don't want Emma to talk to these people anymore?" "That's your right, ma'am. Your house, your rules." But every time Dorothy tried to keep Emma inside, the girl grew restless. "I need to talk to Maria, Nana Dot. She told me important things." "What kind of things?" "There's a young woman who's going to have a baby and doesn't know it yet, and there's a man who lost a lot of money but will find where he put it." Dorothy sighed. How could she explain to a 2-year-old that things were getting insane? The following week, a man in a suit showed up, someone Dorothy had never seen before. "Mrs. Henderson, my name is Rick Castellanos. I represent an event company." Dorothy didn't like the look of him. "What kind of events?" "Well, we thought we could organize something bigger, a proper venue where more people could interact with Emma, with paid admission, of course. You would keep 60% of the revenue." Dorothy slammed the door in his face. That night she called her neighbor Meredith. "Meredith, I don't know what to do anymore. This is getting crazy." "Dorothy, have you thought about leaving town for a while?" "And go where?" "I don't have money for that." "My sister's house in Ocala. It's been empty for months." Dorothy considered the idea, but the next day Emma did something that changed everything. A woman had come with her son, about 5 years old. The boy was in a wheelchair. "Please," the mother begged, "my son had an accident. The doctors say he'll never walk again." Emma looked at the boy for a long time, then turned toward the statue. She was silent for almost 5 minutes, longer than usual. When she turned back, her eyes were filled with tears. Mary said some things cannot be changed. The mother was desperate. "But she can help. Please." Emma shook her head, crying. "Mary said even she cannot do everything." The woman left, shouting that it was all lies, that Dorothy was deceiving people. That night Emma had nightmares. Dorothy found her crying in her room. "What is it, sweetheart?" "Nana Dot, why can't Mary help everyone?" "I don't know, Emma. Sometimes that's just the way things are." "I don't like it when people get mad at me." Dorothy hugged the girl, and in that moment she made a decision. The next morning, when people arrived as usual, Dorothy stepped out onto the porch. "Everyone, starting today, Emma will no longer talk to anyone. She's a little child, and this has become far too heavy for her." A man in the crowd shouted, "You can't do that. This girl has a gift." "This girl is 2 years old," Dorothy replied, "and I'm responsible for her." Some people accepted it, others were angry. 2 women camped on the sidewalk for 3 days, waiting for Dorothy to change her mind. But Dorothy kept Emma inside the house for an entire week. Emma was sad the first few days. "Can I at least say goodbye to Mary?" Dorothy hesitated, but agreed. Emma went out to the backyard and sat in front of the statue for about 10 minutes, completely silent. When she came back, she seemed different. What did Mary say? "She said it's time for me to be a normal girl, and that you're a very good grandma for protecting me." From that day on, Emma lost interest in the statue. People kept coming for a few more weeks, but when they saw that Emma never appeared, they gradually gave up. Emma started preschool in September. She made friends, learned to ride a bike, watched cartoons on TV like any other child. Sometimes Dorothy caught her gazing out the window toward the statue in the yard, but Emma never went near it again. "Do you miss talking to Mary?" Dorothy asked once. "A little. Mary said that's the way it had to be." Dorothy never knew how to explain what had happened during those summer months. The people who lived through that time never completely forgot. Carmen Rodriguez kept drinking lemon balm tea. Robert Martinez moved closer to his daughter when his grandson was born. But life went on, as always. The statue is still in the backyard. Occasionally, someone stops in front of the house, curious. What Dorothy never tells anyone is that she still keeps the flower bed around the statue clean. And sometimes, when she's alone in the yard, she looks at the statue and thinks, "Thank you for helping me with Emma when I didn't know what to do." She is never sure if she's speaking to the Virgin Mary, to her own conscience, or simply to the passage of time that heals all things. But she knows that something helped a traumatized little girl become happy again. And in the end, that's all that matters. If this story touched your heart, share it with someone who needs a sign of hope. And if you have your own experience of faith to tell, leave it in the comments. Subscribe so you won't miss the next stories where faith, mystery, and the human heart meet in unforgettable moments. Because sometimes all we need is a fishing net to discover the treasures God has placed in the deepest waters of our existence.